welcome to another amazing episode of Say It Online, where we help digital agency owners stop just randomly shouting into the void and start communicating meaningfully and effectively in this digital age. I'm your host, Say Gabriel, and this episode was brought to you by our sponsor, Nancy Content. If you're sick of conversion content being a huge pain in your agency's butt, especially websites, campaigns, etc., let's talk. With the smoothest content process ever, a team of unbelievably skilled and organized content strategists, and years of subcontracting experience, Anansi is looking to make your life as a digital agency owner unbelievably easier. Just head, if you're interested, to anansicontent.com, that's ANANSI content.com, and hit Let's Talk. And now, without further ado, here's our episode. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode. Now, I know that I say this every week, but I am especially stoked for our guest today, Jake Jorgovan. Now, from his own bio, Jake Jorgovan is a writer, entrepreneur, and creator. He's the founder of Lead Cookie, a done-for-you LinkedIn lead generation service, as well as Content Allies, a company that turns consultants into thought leaders through content marketing. He publishes blog articles on a regular basis at jake-jorgovan.com. We'll link to that in the show notes. But all of that kind of official bio aside, the reason that I'm really excited is because I've actually been connected to Jake from almost the earliest days of my business. And through Jake's own journey and all the content he's produced and the places he spoke, he has actually had a decent amount of influence on not just our business, but our business success. To me, he is really just an inspiration in terms of providing free value and establishing yourself as a thought leader in your industry fast. You know, pre-Lead Cookie, we actually heard him speak about his LinkedIn process. We implemented it. It was wildly successful for us. You know, everything from, podcast book recommendations of clockwork that totally rocked our world internally, helping me drop my hours from 60 a week to 30 a week while taking a steady salary and, in fact, a raise. You know, I have leveraged his networking approach to conferences, his podcast approach to podcasts. We even use Airtable, a platform he recommended, for everything from our internal and client content calendars to actually even totally replacing our CRM system, to planning my own wedding, to tracking our brand images. Anyway, it's really great. Don't want to put too much pressure on you here, Jake, but I am really, really, really excited to say welcome to the show.
Wow, that is possibly the greatest intro I've ever heard. So thank you. And it is amazing to hear just all the impact that content has actually had on you and everything. So that is awesome and amazing to hear. So I got a big smile on my face right now.
Excellent. Doing some research on kind of what you've been up to in the last few months. I'm really excited to see that you've gone further in this direction. But, we'll get to that. Since we last spoke in kind of an interview context, where I think you were interviewing me for your podcast, you've shifted your focus somewhat. Do you want to give us a little bit of an maybe update to your journey, or maybe, what you've been working on lately, your journey, how you got there, et cetera?
Yeah. So one of the biggest things that I realized is, so I've built up Lead Cookie to a very good size, and we're doing phenomenally well. And I've actually gotten that company, again, through the Clockwork book, which is amazing. They really spend about 5 hours a week on Lead Cookie, which is just amazing. And it's crazy. I'm actually making more from the company than I've ever made, despite the fact that I'm not working in it. And somehow it actually runs better and results are better as I got out of it. So,
right? Yes. It's awesome. I'm sure all of our listeners are like, what? How?
It's really crazy how you think you create a lot of value and then you just get smart people in there and they are actually better than you at everything. And so that kind of has been a shift that's been happening over the course of the past year that I've been working toward that. And it's really realized itself probably about 6 months ago that I really was able to step away. And part of what the reasoning behind that was, again, just a big part of it was like diversification and just recognizing that ultimately I built a company around a single lead generation tactic, where like this LinkedIn outreach. And the truth is, if you look at like cold email or like Facebook pages, it's just like, it's like the MySpace like syndrome, where it's like, okay, LinkedIn, it's risky. It's a great platform. It probably will still be great for several years, but ultimately it's like out of my control. And so I really wanted to diversify because I just built up this company and I never want to have to like worry again, is like my company like, or am I going to still have a good to great income coming in or steady stability? So I decided to take those skills and start to apply them and really think through a business model that would be robust, absolutely resilient, and no external factor could destroy it overnight. And that really led me into content marketing as basically what content analysis has become today. And we've kind of done a lot of niche and like designed it in a certain way, but really came to that after wanting to go towards something resilient and just saying content as a marketing channel is not going anywhere. It was relevant 20 years ago. It was relevant 50 years ago in the form of like printed articles, and it's going to evolve, but it's never going to go away. And so that is kind of the shift, and I guess the reasoning behind the shift. And so today, most of my focus is building content allies while I just kind of coach my lead cookie team and let them do their thing.
That's really, really cool to know that many of the kind of the entrepreneurs we speak to have many visions and may pick up many businesses or different things that they're working on. But it's not very often that I hear that, you know, your business became so profitable and independent that you actually kind of had that leeway and freedom to start thinking. And I mean, you could argue that maybe you shouldn't wait until, you know, you're at that perfect point to start thinking about these things like diversification. And, one of the gold pieces that I'm hearing here is that when you decided to do something else, you basically niched down and focused in a different area that you saw having particular value as time went on and kind of not losing that value. Is that so kind of like creating a model that works and mimicking it rather than kind of growing your existing business in a different direction? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah. I think like whenever I started Lead Cookie, I was in the spot where I see a lot of people that are in like my audience or readers, and like they're just trying to figure out how to succeed and like have a business that actually makes money and get people to pay them. And like that's like I think the starting point for most entrepreneurs. And so at that point, you're just doing whatever you can to like make a business that works. And like I just wasn't thinking that long of term. And even like early in the stages, I remember like my advisor, Alex McClafferty, was basically telling me, he's like, hey, like think through all these risks things. And I even like looked back at my like first business, like brain dump plan thing that I put together for Lead Cookie. And it was like risk. LinkedIn could change their platform someday. And I was like, well, whatever. That's not a big deal. Like it'll figure it out. And then like 2 years later, I'm like, that's still actually a pretty big deal. And so like, just if you build like a risk into your business model, it's not going to really just fix itself or go away. And I think some people are just really short-sighted and they want the money tomorrow versus really taking a longer term picture and think like, hey, I'm going to invest years of my life into something, into building this. Like I should really think this through and make sure this is what I want and that I'm not just chasing like the short-term, like easiest path to success. That was like a big shift for me the second time around, is just really thinking the long term. And it really came from like, ultimately it's like, it's awesome where Lead Cookie is, but it's like kind of like also frustrating to realize like, oh man, I just put a ton of work into this and like some external factor could just like wipe this out overnight. It's almost like all the people who built their, niche sites on Google SEO and then like Google changed their stuff and just killed it. It's like, oh wow, you just invested 2 years of your life into something that Google killed overnight. It's like, that's like the same risk we face essentially.
So what I'm hearing is that because LinkedIn is not a medium that you own, not just risk, but I think a certain kind of fear associated with that, or just reality check that it could all go away outside of your control, which in some ways kind of counteracts the reason why we go into business for ourselves, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, exactly. And there's factors like that in everybody's business, whether they build it around Facebook, whether build something around like the App Store or some like short-term, any short-term marketing tactic that people start selling like this. Like Facebook ads was a thing that like it was really easy to build a business a few years ago, and like now it's really hard. So I think all of those things, it's just something to think about in the long-term piece of it.
Agreed. I think that makes a lot of sense. So now, you're looking at what is something that is really going to endure, what is something that you can own, what is something you can continue to provide value, outside of whatever the industry might be kind of shifting as it mercurially does. So I'm curious, how much did you have to kind of rise to the occasion to fill this opportunity or need did you see that you saw, or how much did you kind of identify an opportunity or need that aligned with your existing kind of passions and skills?
Yeah, it was a not straight path. So it was not very clear cut or straightforward. Actually, I just like November, December last year, like launched what was V1 of Content Allies, which totally failed, which was supposed to be like virtual assistants for content marketers to handle all the basic tasks. And that was just horrible and not profitable and not nice to run. And so we ended up shutting down like V1 of it. Then I actually hit success initially, or kind of success, with LinkedIn content. So we actually signed on like 25 customers where we were doing LinkedIn content for them. And we're still doing all that for a lot of them. But then at some point I was like, what the hell am I doing? I'm doing it again. Like, this is risky. So
yep, LinkedIn.
Yep. And so I was like, oh, people want to buy this. So this is interesting. And then eventually I just kind of said, okay, what I'm going to do, like the whole Lead Cookie is like a productized service. And I basically said, I'm like, hey, I'm going to build a content agency around a niche persona. And I am going to build a series of products that serve them. And so it's like really nothing innovative or crazy that I'm doing. Like, we're a content agency. We do article writing. We do podcast production. We do LinkedIn content. And we have a niche persona of basically a consultant or someone who is an expert in their field. And the only way that they can put out great content is if we interview them and pull those ideas out of their head. So
I know it well.
it's like very like simple what we're doing, but it was actually not very straight line to get there. So
I think that falls into a category that seems to come across fairly often, which is simple but not easy, right? Sometimes it's often the kind of simplest models are the hardest to get to. For one, because I think we get excited. We see so many different kind of opportunities go in all these different directions, or kind of the opposite, as you're saying, which is that it's easy to kind of pigeonhole ourselves unintentionally. Now, we've talked quite a bit about kind of the different types of businesses and how you've shifted from one to the other, but I want to kind of talk about a different aspect of building these businesses. So when we last did an interview a few years ago, we were each primarily kind of solopreneurs with a bit of help, a bit of admin help. Since then, it looks like we both scaled into businesses where we aren't the primary service providers. And I know that this is something, reading through the content that you produce, that you champion quite heavily. So I'd love to ask, what was that transition? Because, it's one of those things I think also falls within the category of like simple, not easy. You can only do so much as a human. It's difficult to scale if you do everything yourself, but sometimes harder done. So what was that journey like for you?
It's definitely an evolution, and just, I guess, growing and becoming a leader there's definitely challenges that come with it. But I think ultimately, for a long time, I fought it and was like, I just want to charge higher rates and like not have a team because that's like complicated. And then I have all these people that answer to me. And I think a lot of people build stories in their heads that having a team is like stressful and more work, or like less freedom than doing it all yourself. And like, that is definitely not true. It's there.
I mean, to be fair, if poorly executed, it can be true.
Yes, if poorly executed. But once you get to a point where you are like, I think the biggest things that I realized or learned throughout it was that I had to grow to set an example and lead my team and really coach them and invest a ton in them. And I think a lot of people, like, there's so many points on this of just people try to pay their people as little as possible, and they don't build a culture. So like people just feel like they're showing up and like trading for a paycheck, versus if you like invest in your people, you coach them, you build a cool culture, they're excited about what they're doing. All of these things, like you just get these people that are like champions for you, and they will like jump through hoops that are flaming and do whatever it takes to like make your things work because like they believe in the vision and they're part of it and what they're creating. So like all of this comes together where like at the end of the day, like my team at Lead Cookie, like we've got like 26 people and they execute everything. And literally I just like coach them and occasionally like deal with some question outside of their control, but pretty much like they handle it all. But that came through tons of investment, tons of time coaching, leading them, and also leveling myself up as a leader to be able to lead them as well.
That makes a lot of sense. And, I have definitely experienced that as well as we've grown our team at Anansi, that the importance of leadership and also leading by example. Now, you mentioned something that we too have found extremely critical, which is this idea around culture. And I think this is something that's kind of tossed around a lot in the digital world, in the remote world, is to hire for culture. As someone who kind of champions that concept, I'd just love to hear, what are some key kind of examples or shifts in your mindset that you made that allowed you to be much more successful in hiring for culture?
Yeah, so this is literally like the article I published last week because I've been like feeling like, well, I've been feeling the need to write something on culture. And we just finished our 2019 Marble Rally race, which I'll share on that. But like the culture, it first comes down to like the values and stuff like that and making sure you have people aligned with your values. And there's a bunch of stuff out there. Jim Collins has some of like the most like he wrote a lot of the stuff on like values initially. And so his exercises is kind of how we went through to get to the values. But then like specifically bringing that culture into the company, every time we onboard a new team member, whether it's onshore or offshore, anybody, I basically have a 30-minute call with them at least, sometimes 45, and literally walk them through a culture deck that just shares everything about our values, who we are, some kind of points, just kind of gets them in the loop about, who we are and what we do. And we actually also live those and we incorporate those values into like what we actually do. And so, we do compensate our team well. I have people that are like, why do you pay your Philippines team so much? Like you could get them way cheaper. And I'm like, cause I like to treat them and like pay them above a wage of poverty and like let them be happy so that they do good work for us.
Heck,
And
yeah.
like, it's stuff like that. Or some of the other things, we do education reimbursements where everybody gets $50 a quarter to put towards self-development because one of our values is lifelong learning. We do work-life balance scores every week. We're literally at the end of the meeting, everyone says on a scale of 1 to 10, how's your work-life balance? And like, it's that way we make sure we're not working anybody like crazy or exhausting them. We do like weekly jokes, and we even recently produced an entire 7-race marble racing series, which is ridiculous. And it's basically horse racing with marbles, and it's fun. So we do tons of goofy stuff like this, but like all of these things, like it just gets people ingrained in it, and they like jump through hoops to try to help the company succeed. And like, cause they feel like part of it, and they are part of it, and they ultimately help build and like have autonomy and actually see impact from their work.
Wow, that's really amazing. And lots of really, really specific examples there. So thank you for that. We'll definitely link to your article. And I really love this idea of kind of a culture deck. This was something in our most recent round of hiring we also implemented. We actually put it right in our, like a link to it in our job description. And we took an actual kind of speech, a value speech that I did for the team that was particularly resonant for everybody, and just shared that directly. But other things, we're hearing here as well. So making sure you're compensating them accurately, right? Reimbursing for education, doing fun stuff with them and collaborative stuff with your team, and making sure that you're giving time and space to listen to them. Something really critical that, again, just we have found through our experience has been really, really important that you said right at the beginning as well, is just making sure that you have these values at the basis of your culture that you're actually living, not just kind of aspiring to, around who you are, what we do, what you value, etc. I'm curious though, you mentioned a lot of different things that you do kind of once you have people on the team. What are some ways that you screen for this? 26 is quite a few people. How are you able to find 26 people that share your values so closely?
Yeah, it's something where, again, we also put them on the job applications, which definitely helps to kind of screen and weed people in and out and whatnot. And we also have what we call a gauntlet style application process. So if anyone looks at a job posting on our site, it's a process. It's probably like an hour to apply to a job with us. And like we have people like literally they record a video with Mozart playing in the background, and they have to say moist is the first word and toodaloo is the last word. And like, I'm not even joking. I have people that like cuss me out in email, like this is outrageous and like all this stuff like this. So putting all of that there, making it super, like one of our values at Lead Cookie is details matter. And like putting that in this like job thing, it is a way to find people that are going to have that detail oriented and that also get the humor and don't have an issue saying moist. Like, so that's like one thing that definitely helps. And then, I can't say we do it perfectly. We have had a few mishires that we had to let go over the time, but it's also just kind of just making sure let everybody know like, hey, this is a test at the start. I think we've gotten better at it because it's just like going off of our gut and learning from a few mistakes, but we're still not perfect. But those are some of the things we do.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you for sharing. Anyone who's listened to our podcast before knows that we at Anansi also have a quite extensive process for applying. Although I think what you described in terms of sheer awesomeness has yet to be unparalleled in the different application processes. I just moist for whatever reason is just, it's such a weird word. I mean, it's not weird at all, but like it's for some reason it's entertaining to say.
We actually had a job posting company that like took us down and like wasn't going to leave it up there, and we had to argue because our team now has moist coffee mugs that like they like coordinated this together and like all ordered like I wasn't even like instigated by me.
Wow.
And so like literally like we shipped pictures or we sent pictures of all the team with their moist coffee mugs to the job posting company, like, please let us keep moist in our job posting, we love it. Like, so yeah, it's a little ridiculous.
Wow, that's awesome. But that's, just kind of circling us back around to the idea of culture, right? That's exactly it. Like moist, what I'm hearing is that moist, although it is somewhat of an arbitrary word, it's aligned with your values in multiple different ways. It's the attention to detail, but it's also something that you guys have kind of banded together around. You find it a little bit silly. It's something you guys can kind of chuckle together because everybody's been through it who is on the team. Like all of those things kind of indicate a type of person who's going to not just remember to do it, but appreciate doing it. And that's kind of the more ephemeral, I don't know, it sounds a little bit ephemeral to me, like I can't put it into bullet points in the way that my brain wants to. But I think that that's really powerful to kind of see that again in practice.
Yeah, definitely. It's all looser things. It's hard to like pinpoint all this stuff down. And you just have to figure out what works right for you. It's an interesting thing. As I build content allies, like I realize I'm like, I can't just copy and paste the culture. Like I share these marble races over here. And I'm like, I don't think these people just think I'm crazy on this side. Like, it's like, so it's like it's a totally different culture. So I think it has to like become its own thing. And so like, I don't think you can just force it or copy and paste someone else's. It's just got to be true to who you are as the founder and who the team is that gravitates around it. So.
I think that's really valuable right there as well. I know that when I was first starting, ideas like brand and culture and et cetera were really just a reflection of me as the founder, because after all, that was who the business was, right? And even challenging myself to kind of adapt to that, understanding, our audience a little bit more and maybe kind of picking different parts of me. At least I've noticed that as you build a team, it does have to come from you because it does have to be authentic as the person who is that, visionary championing things. But it's a special kind of magic because you also have to find the particular areas of you and your personality and your values that overlap with these other people's, and it almost becomes its own living entity because some people may leave, some people may stay, or as other people are added to it, it grows. But it really does end up having a life. What I'm hearing from you, at least, Jake, is that my experience as well, our experience at Anansi, is that it does end up having a life almost separate from you and the team, but connected to all of it. Is that kind of what I'm hearing? So it changes from business to business.
Yeah, definitely. It's like my COO is honestly the one who instigated the weekly jokes and the one who started like sharing that marble racing was even a thing with us. And then like I created like filmed the marble races and he did the voiceover. So it's like this collaboration with like my COO, who is the other lead at the company, who has created a lot of the lead cookie content. And on the content ally side, even I'm saying this now, I'm like, this is probably why it's different. I don't have Jeff there to be like silly, goofy with me. So like, I'm just me just being goofy with all these people. So like, it's not just you. I think it's the dynamic of anybody else that's leading with you or who those other like key people that you bring into the mix is.
Absolutely. And did you find, as someone who has grown a team quite quickly, do you find that shifts kind of depending on the size of your team? Or do you find that kind of the principles of creating that culture and leveraging it and hiring for it and et cetera kind of apply across the board, no matter how small or how big you are?
I think they probably apply across the board, but I think early on, those first hires, you probably don't have as much of an idea of this. I think it's as you really start to grow and add more people in, I think you really learn what your culture is when you screw up and you bring on someone that doesn't align and you couldn't quite put your finger on it until you made that bad hire and you're like, this is clearly where they were not aligned with the rest of the team.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, and that's, I think, the moments where you really start to realize, okay, this was why, and like this is what we value that they did not care about. And so I think that those are the moments where you really start to figure that out.
It's funny that you bring that up because, although our team, which is sitting at about 8 people, and this is pretty much our mature size, we might add another strategist at some point, but this is kind of where we want to be. We really noticed that and here's my kind of vulnerable moment here, hiring for our admin position 6 times in the past year and a half. I'm not sure if those are exact numbers in terms of the number of times and the amount of time it's been, but that was really the critical thing that allowed us to change. Now we have an admin person who's just golden and incredible and amazing. Kevin, if you're listening to this, shout out to you, man. I would say the key thing that really helped us achieve that was exactly what you were talking about. When somebody didn't work out, really taking a good hard look. Because if somebody doesn't work out once, okay, yeah, maybe it was on them or whatever. If somebody doesn't work out many times in a role, then you are doing something wrong hiring. Let's just be real about that. And we really found that was the critical piece, is looking at all of the different hires and identifying and understanding number one, where they didn't fit into our core values. And number two, what sorts of things we could potentially do to screen without saying, hey, is this a value of yours? So that they could show us as opposed to telling us. I'm curious to hear, Jake, whether you have some kind of, other than, that initial kind of messaging thing, what have you kind of done to be able to see without people just telling you, okay, this is our value? Is it really just that simple, the moist, or do you have more than one step? What does that look like?
Yeah, so the lead cookie side is hard because it is very much like the lead cookie. A lot of the roles we hire they're operators. They are people that are going to execute things. They need to be really detail oriented. And then they just got to have a good personality that we enjoy and get along with. So for that front, it's a little harder. It's very much the details and making sure they hit everything that in the details. We've a ton of little Easter eggs in there. And so that is on the lead cookie front. And then the content allies, some of the things that we have started to find is that curiosity is a very good trait, and also people's ability to be a self-starter and have their own side projects. So every single Content Allies team member we have had a side project or has one still going upon coming to work with us. And so we started to notice that with everybody that we hired. We're like, wow, everybody, they've got their own blog, or they've got their own e-commerce store on the side, or they got their own thing they're trying to start. And so seeing just trends like that across the people that do work out, again, is just something that is useful to look for. And then again, just asking for writing samples and stuff has been just helpful to actually see their work in that case. But just that trend, I think that's one that we found that was really helpful.
Definitely that seeing their work as well. That's something that it's tempting to ask these kind of fancy questions, but until you can actually see whether they can do the job, if it is an operator position, that's really critical. You've mentioned quite a few things right now, but maybe more accurate be, I noticed on your website that you've kind of been going into different mediums in terms of writing. And I noticed, just because I have you on Facebook and have for a long time, that social media has been a big medium for you lately. So we're shifting a little bit, moving from kind of people you hire to yourself and your own writing practice. So I'm quite curious, just as writers, we find that writing for different platforms can be a whole different kind of genre and project in itself. I'm curious how you found your social media writing different from, say, the blog that you used as a medium in the past, and different from kind of a podcast, and how people might know what medium is best for them.
Yeah, so this had zero intentionality to do with medium or marketing. So the practice that everyone sees on my daily social media posts, which go out to Facebook and LinkedIn and occasionally go out to Instagram whenever my buffer feed doesn't go down, which goes down all the time. But basically, I started up this practice. I learned this from a guy, Garrett J. White, who runs Wake Up Warrior, of this concept of doing a daily discover and declare. And so it's the idea that every morning I wake up, I learn something, and then I reinforce that by reteaching the concept that I learned. And so basically that is what those daily social posts are. And I think at this point, I'm definitely over a year. I can't remember when I started actually tracking the numbers on the back end, but I've definitely been doing this for over a year, just straight of just every day waking up, literally read 5 minutes, go through a training or something online for 5 minutes, 10 minutes maybe, and whenever I have just some revelation or something, I'll like take that, what I learned, and then I'll try to apply that to maybe a story or look at my own situation or like how that applied to something that happened in my own life and past and basically reteach that concept. And so that's what actually came of it, or how this started. And it had nothing to do with social media. It was just the idea of like, hey, teach what you learn to reinforce it. And I was just like, hey, I can just start putting these on LinkedIn. And then I create content and good things come from that. And eventually I was like, well, I could probably get this on a bunch of channels. So I basically started putting it in Evernote and having my virtual assistant design little graphics for that each day and then putting it out on Facebook and LinkedIn. So that's like the process. There was zero intentionality behind like, this is going to market me. Like it was really like a self-development practice and just doing it in public.
That's awesome. I mean, quite frankly, I think in some ways there is as much or more value in kind of learning about that as being your motivation as opposed to an intentional marketing practice. Not that there's anything wrong with an intentional marketing practice on social media, and not that the two can't overlap. In fact, myself personally say, but also at Anansi, anyone who knows us knows that we are huge champions of using your authentic kind of message and experience to kind of invite your audience into a story they can relate to. But it's interesting that you say that because, on a pure functional level, I've really enjoyed consuming a lot of the different stuff that you've put out there. But on an emotional level, that kind of self-reflective tone and those kind of daily tidbits, which, sometimes I see and sometimes I don't see, I'd say they really hit me on an emotional level. And I think that what you're talking about, that self-reflectiveness, is probably why, now that I, learn more about it and hear more about it. That's really cool. Because honestly, for me, it's been a lot of gold there. For our listeners, just to kind of give an example, one that popped up, I believe, in the last few days was on constraints and how, it can be overwhelming to look at an open project without any constraints, but setting constraints for yourself can actually be a really good way to kind of propel yourself and motivate yourself. So see, it was so succinct and awesome that I could quote it in 20 seconds, which is also really good messaging wise.
Yeah. And I probably pulled that from like some podcast interview somewhere. I can't even remember, but I just like learn it and then I just apply it to whatever my own world is. So
there you go. And that's so, the fact that you're layering the impact in terms of you're learning more, you're creating a writing habit, you're sharing with your audience, etc. I think that's really cool. I do want to kind of encapsulate the whole spectrum. If social media is kind of the most casual, introspective platform out there, you've also recently published a book, which is kind of on the other end of formality. So what was that like? Do you want to kind of tell us a little bit about your book and what it's about?
Yeah, so basically wrote a book called The Consultant's Path to Thought Leadership. And I mean, at the core, this was actually had a great conversation with Bridget Lyons, who also a woman in like a PR space. And at one point, we were actually in a mastermind as we were kind of like, I was building up Content Allies. And I was like, the start Content Allies was just like, I was just trying to figure out what this was going to be, what we're going to do, what we're going to focus on. And she was like, well, you just need to have a point of view and like, what's your actual approach? And I realized when I looked at it, like I have a pretty strong opinion on like how people should approach content. And especially for people that are experts or individuals like myself, where like you're building a personal brand or you want to leverage like your personal brand to grow multiple businesses. Like I've taken an approach, and I think a lot of the stuff out there is a lot of noise and junk. And I just see people like totally confused whenever they come and like thinking about that. So I was like, all right, well, I'm going to like put everything that I believe, like cut out the noise. Cause I would always have people ask me of like, oh, I want to get into content. And I couldn't have any single resource to refer them to. Cause I'm like, well, that one's kind of good, but it's a little internet markety, like, or like, that stuff. And I'd always have to like recommend with a but kind of behind it. And so basically this was like my entire approach on the path that I've taken to really build myself as an influencer and thought leader, and like how I've been able to build 2 businesses now off of the back end of that. And also, I did this through some consulting as well. Even before Lead Cookie, one of the customers that I was doing this for had just phenomenal results that came out of this. He closed like $500,000 of business from the content I created right before I cut off my contract with them and went to Lead Cookie. So I was like, wow, I actually did something well here. So it's basically kind of a journey for anyone who is a consultant or say like an expert in their field or selling their expertise, and a path to try to simplify how to think through content and the different aspects of that.
Wow. Excellent. Excellent. Well, I guess kind of what we started out by saying, you've been able to approach things in different ways, but really what I'm hearing here is that you've harnessed your own experience, your own journey, and the things that you've learned along the way based on kind of real results and real success, and use that as a reference point, not just to build, obviously a huge part of this is building yourself as that thought leader, but also I'm hearing as a reference for, your approach, the things that you've learned, et cetera, that you can actually direct people to. Almost it's like a reinforcing feedback of creating that thought leadership, right? Because it's a useful tool as well.
Yeah, there's a quote I got from a guy, David Sherry, another guy who I follow, and he said, like, if you want to become like really like a thought leader or just become like someone like a world-renowned author, like you got to become someone worth following. And I just like found that to be like this like incredible thing where it's like, if you're doing nonfiction or you're blogging or you're putting out your personal brand, like if you're not accomplishing or like pushing forward or progressing, like no one's going to care. And it's about who you become and like what you share along that journey and like the story that you put out there along the way, like that is such an impact on it. And the more that you become, like people don't read Richard Branson's book because he's a great author. He probably had someone ghostwrite it for him in reality, but they read it because Richard Branson has amazing stories and amazing things to share. And so that kind of perspective, I think, is always really helpful as you're going down this path as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this just circles us back around to this idea that the more kind of value that you can share, the more people will see the expertise behind that and appreciate that and find appeal in that. So that's really excellent. Now, I mean, I could easily keep asking you questions for a long, long time, but I do want to respect your time here and kind of start to wind us down a little bit. So I have a few kind of quicker lightning round questions, but before we get into that, is there anything that you wish that I had asked you or that you'd like to share with our listeners that I didn't get to?
I think one of just like the big concepts that we've been just kind of hitting around a bit, I think when we get into the leadership or we get into the content piece, and it's just this whole idea that your business is a reflection of yourself. And the same with like your personal brand. And it's like, if you are chaotic and you don't have good habits or you are, coming into work hungover, like all that stuff impacts your business. And like who you are, your self-development, like your growth, your confidence, all of these things massively impact the business and what your business becomes. And I think a lot of people look external and they think the answer is in some like tactical thing in business that's going to fix their problems and help them. But in reality, most of the time, what they need to work on is like improving themselves as an individual. And that is the biggest key to unlocking your growth in a business.
That is so poignant and resonant for me. I think we've all had experiences where we perhaps have tried to change people or tried to change a situation or tried to do things. But, I've definitely noticed that the most impact I have ever been able to have on my business, on the world around me, on my family and relationships is really to take that hard look at myself and to do the self-work. So thank you. Thank you for sharing that, Jake. I think that's really valuable to point to. Now, are you ready for 3 kind of more faster paced questions to finish
ready.
off? All right. Awesome. So what is the one thing that always gets you up in the morning?
The one thing question. I love that. So it's probably just my routine. And like, I love waking up really early and just creating. And like, I get excited for the time. My favorite part of the time of the day, outside obviously of like hanging out with my wife at the end of the day, is probably that like morning time before I ever have to hop on calls with anybody and just like be able to create things. Like what I love is creating stuff. Like that is my ultimate like unique ability where I'm at my strongest, just creating. So for me to get up and like to be creating, like that is what fuels me. And as much as I can design my days around that, then I get excited to get out of bed every morning that I know that that's my day. The days when I have calls starting super early or something with like people in other parts of the world, those are not days that I get as excited about. So as long as I've got that creative time in every day, then that's like the exciting thing for me.
That's awesome. And once again, that kind of self-reflectiveness, right? And that self-awareness, crafting things around what you're noticing about what is, not what you wish them to be. Awesome. Okay, next question. What is another one thing question? Maybe I should rename this section to the one thing section. What is the number one thing that you do to preserve your wellness?
to preserve like wellness and overall just like health and mindfulness and everything.
Yeah, however you choose to interpret that, but yeah.
Yeah. So again, that's going to probably go the routine that every morning, again, do journaling, along with that discover and declare. I have a green smoothie every day. I work out in some capacity every single day and meditate every single day. So literally, like I do all of that. This is part of a framework from Garrett J. White of Wake Up Warrior, where it's just like this, like that's called the Core 4 morning routine that they have. And it's super impactful. And it is just a simple thing that I literally check it off every single day and go through it. And all those combined, just super impactful to getting me going into my day with like a good amount of power and just energy and in a good headspace and everything.
Excellent. Excellent. Now I have follow-up questions. Maybe just one super quick follow-up question, which is, do you find that energy then is pervasive throughout the day? Or is it really just kind of getting you going in the morning?
I know it definitely holds me throughout the day. And again, the meditation piece is so important just to keep mindfulness. Like if I don't meditate for like 3 or 4 days, like I get anxiety and, or I get anxiety or I get massively distracted. And it's like, that is just such a powerful thing to just be able to go through your day and just be able to recognize when you're being triggered by something or just being able to see things more clearly. So it is definitely has power to get me going in the morning, but it's also just keeps me in a good flow throughout the full day.
That's excellent. That's really powerful. How long do you spend on your routine every day?
It is probably about an hour and a half to 2 hours every day. So it's a pretty good sized morning routine.
Yeah.
Typically that includes like workout in there as well, which sometimes I might put the workout to the afternoon or something. But yeah, I put a good amount of time into it every single day and it powers me up and I wake up early so that I always have time to do that. So it's super important for me. And if I don't get it, it definitely, I feel like I'm in a reactive mode all day. So
I definitely, for me, I think Monday morning where I really set the whole week, intention for the whole week, I definitely can relate to that. And just the last quick question, how long of that is meditating?
Typically I do 10 to 15 minutes.
10 to 15 minutes?
Yeah, so that's typically normal. Sometimes I've gone up to 20, but normally 10 to 15 is the typical average. So
awesome. So I know this probably isn't new to our listeners, but I just want to reinforce 10 to 15 minutes. That's not a long time every day. And that was, you said that was really, really powerful for you. Awesome. Last question. What is the weirdest habit that you have that contributes to your success?
The weirdest habit. Oh, I would have to say this is a growing or newer habit, but I have recently gotten into EDM music production. And so like, I guess it's become like the hobby on the side. And it's this interesting thing where it's not just the fact that I'm like making music, but for me, this is like this overcoming of a story that I had when I was a kid that I'm not a musician. And to realize as I'm older, like, hey, like actually I just had this story that I'm not a musician because like my dad got really frustrated at me when I played French horns and then I never practiced and then I was always really bad at band. So I told people I wasn't musically talented.
Right. That story.
And then like later in life, I'm like, wait, that's a load of crap. Like I can learn this. And like, and in, a few months I do piano lessons and I learn music theory. And then I'm like, holy crap, I can make pretty cool songs already. And I'm like, 4 or 5 months in. And so this is something that just like gives a ton of power in the overcoming of that story. I think there's just a ton of power in that. So it's this odd thing of like pursuing the, I guess, like childhood dreams and passions you have before the world crushes them and like realizing and that like it gives like confidence and power to all areas of life.
That just put a huge smile on my face. Just a huge smile on my face. That is so awesome. I guess you've explained contextually why that's weird, but I think you've also done a really, really glorious job of explaining why it's awesome and important. And actually not all that weird at all. I think we can all relate to pursuing our childhood dreams.
Exactly.
Never too late, guys.
Even if you don't ever make a living off of it or anything, like to just pursue it again. And like, it's so fulfilling. So I can't speak enough to like thinking back who that kid you once were was that the world has shut down and bringing that kid back to life. So.
And bringing that kid back. That is excellent. What an excellent and beautiful note to end this interview on. I just want to thank you again. Thank you so much, Jake. This has been chock full of awesome stuff for our listeners. It's also great to get to know you and what you're working on and your journey there a little bit better from a different angle.
No problem. Thanks for having me on here.
Awesome. And I would love to, we kind of bounced around today from kind of internal, external stuff, et cetera. It'd be great to have you on here to talk more specifically about your different areas of expertise in the future.
Yeah, I'm more than happy to. You're a phenomenal interviewer, so I'm always happy to come on anytime.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. That's even from this process, I even have ideas about how to interview better, but I'm scribbling notes every time I'm not talking. So anyway, Jake, thank you so much. You've also mentioned quite a few awesome resources in here, a few different either people or books or etc. We are going to link to all of that in the show notes. So by all means, head on over to our website, anansicontent.com. That's ANANSICONTENT for all that super awesome, cool swag. And don't forget to follow us on whatever platform you prefer. Thanks, guys, and have an excellent rest of your day. And that does it for another amazing episode of the Say It Online podcast. Join us next week. And don't forget to like and subscribe, whether it's iTunes, whatever your favorite podcast player is. It is always, always appreciated. It really makes a difference for us. It helps us get this word out to more people. As always, this episode was brought to you by our sponsor and Say's own business, Anansi Content. If you're a digital agency owner and you're still wasting too much time chasing down content that maybe isn't even all that great, let's talk. We've spent years working on the best process for selling, planning, and delivering amazing conversion content for your client projects. Better yet, we moosh our process to yours so that your client and you have a seamless and amazing experience the entire time through. If you're interested, just go to our website. That's www.anansicontent.com. That's ANANSI content.com. And just click Let's Talk. I'd love to chat with you. Someone else on the team would also love to chat with you too. Hope you have an amazing rest of your day.